Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the green-white Collector's Cage archetype, which has gotten a lot of new goodies from recent expansions. So the key build around is this 2-mana artifact with Hideaway 5. So when it enters, we get to look at the top 5 cards of our library, exiling 1 face down. Then we can activate Cage for 1 mana, putting a +1/+1 counter on target creature we control. Then if we control 3 or more creatures with different powers, we may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. So Cage can try and cheat some very expensive cards into play, such as now we've got Craterhoof Behemoth as an excellent finisher for a token go wide strategy, as this can often end the game on the spot. Then there's Overlord of the Mistmoors, can still impend it for 4 mana, giving it a more accessible mana cost, but if we can cast it through Cage, of course we get the 7 mana version. And then there's Elspeth Stormslayer, which is still castable at 5 mana thanks to our mana creatures, but of course hitting it off Cage would also be very nice, getting to double all our tokens, make soldiers, pump the team and give it flying, and maybe destroy opposing creatures with mana value 3 or greater. So these are the payoffs we're hoping to hide away with Collector's Cage, and then to round out the deck we want some token makers, so a single card can make multiple creatures to enable Collector's Cage, and then mana accelerants are also welcome, so we can maybe ramp out some of the more expensive cards if we end up drawing them. So at 1 mana we've got the full set of Alenra Elves to give us a nice mana boost, maybe cast our 3-drops on turn 2 already. There's Pawpatch Recruit, which we might be able to offspring on turn 2 of a turn 1 Alenra Elves, making an additional Pawpatch Recruit token, can punish the opponent for targeting our creatures with removal by giving our team additional counters, which also makes it easier to have multiple creatures with different powers to then enable Collector's Cage, and the Recruit by itself also makes 2 creatures with different powers. Then at 2 mana besides Cage, we have the new Voice of Victory, a 1/3 with Mobilize 2, preventing the opponent from casting spells during our turn, and that part is actually pretty important when trying to go off with Collector's Cage at times. If your opponent is keeping up instant speed removal, they might be able to mess up some of your Collector's Cage synergies by destroying a creature, so you no longer have 3 creatures with different powers, so then Voice of Victory can shut that all down, while also making multiple tokens by itself if we need to get those 3 creatures in play first, since we can activate Cage at instant speed, so we can attack first, make the tokens, maybe get Voice up to 2 power, and then if we have a 0 or 3-powered creature for instance, we can still get the Cage to cast a spell for free. And then we've got some mana accelerants at 2 mana as well, with the Armored Scrapgorger, which starts out at 0 power, which is useful for Cage, and when it taps can also exile cards from graveyards, so that gives us some graveyard hate against some of the graveyard combo decks, thinking of Omniscience combo. And then the Wild Guide is also tailor-made for this archetype as a mana creature that can also tap to instead put a +1 counter on itself, so that's another way to get creatures to different powers to set up the Cage, and if we cast it with Offspring it might also benefit from an Elspeth Stormslayer on the battlefield to make an additional Offspring token. And then at 3 mana, the token makers continue with Sandstorm Salvager, making a 3/3 golem, can also pay 2 mana, tap it to put a +1 counter on all our tokens and give them trample until end of turn. And then we also have a 1 of Toby, making a 4/4 beast that cannot attack or block alone, and if we control 4 or more tokens, then creature tokens we control also have flying, so that's another nice upside. And then last but not least, 2 copies of Sheltered by Ghost to give the deck a little bit more interaction than just the -3 from Elspeth. The life gain's also very helpful against all the red aggro decks out there, and this can also be an answer to a temporary lockdown, for instance, which could otherwise exile the Cage and a lot of our cheaper creatures. And then the mana base also gets access to 2 copies of Fountain Port, which is also a pretty nice mana sink, especially with an Elspeth on the battlefield, making double the fish tokens or treasure tokens. And then plenty of green-white dual lands entering untapped early. So yeah, that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Alenra Elves to speed things up. Can maybe play Recruit with Offspring on 2. As our opponent plots a ruckus. Okay, I think I'm down to play the Recruit, since we do need to have 3 creatures in play. And then next turn there's a chance we can already reap the rewards of our Collector's Cage. Yeah, I guess currently we would still need to wait an extra turn to get a creature up to 3 power to really enable things. But yeah, opponent plotting a slick shot, so they're setting up for a big turn here. Could wait on Collector's Cage. But if I play Voice of Victory, we still don't quite get 3 different powers. So I think I'm kinda forced to play it here. And then Sheltered by Ghosts might be our best pick, or we can get another Collector's Cage and try and chain those together. And then we can attack, activate maybe on the token, and then next turn I can grow one of my 2-powered creatures into a 3-powered creature. But our opponent could have their own Sheltered by Ghosts. It's going to be Manifolds plus Heartfire. Alright. And a land is useful. So step 1 can get this up to 3 power. Get another cage. Hideaway. This time getting the Overlord. And then... yeah, I guess we just go for Overlord, plus... could play another cage, maybe play this one first in case we hit something even better. Although I can't imagine getting something better than the Overlord. So then I might want Voice of Victory in play instead. And then I need to get this up to 4 power, or something else also up to 2 power. So I guess Voice up to 2 power is fine. Cast Overlord. And then next turn Cage can maybe look for Craterhoof Behemoth. And sure, these could start attacking. But yeah, opponent still has those plotted cards, so we have to be careful. For now, just a challenger. Ruckus on the Heartfire hero. And there's Slick Shot. And then have to assume their last card is a Monstrous Rage. And do the math accordingly. So they're not sending in Slick Shot just yet. Our opponent interestingly went for Trample on Challenger as opposed to Double Strike. So this seems like a pretty straightforward block. And then let's say they Monstrous Rage, could be on the Slick Shot. Then they still Trample for 5, trigger Prowess. So that's 9 plus 4, 13, so we're not dead yet. Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. And then next turn we should have them on the way back, especially if we hit something else juicy off Cage. Alright, damage happened. I guess they might have the Sellsword instead, fair enough. So then they do get to deal 8 damage total, but that's still not lethal. And then now play another Cage, look for Craterhoof. And we found it. Nice. So actually the sequencing is interesting, since I could wait for the Overlord to make extra tokens so we can pump those as well. But then the Craterhoof itself doesn't get to attack. Although maybe that was still worth it overall to maximize our damage, since we could wait for the Voice of Victory tokens to enter as well, make the tokens of the Overlord, and then put in Craterhoof, and then the damage would be a lot more, but yeah, doesn't really matter here. On to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw with a pretty unconventional hand. Voice of Victory, try and suit it up with a Sheltered by Ghosts. And then hope that goes the distance. No green mana currently. Don't think that's good enough. Alright, this seems a bit more balanced. And then I might just keep Scribe Gorger, hope to ramp out Overlord. But if it does get removed, it may not work out. And our opponent seems to be on a Pixie deck. So can expect plenty of interaction. For now, Fear pick up the roll token, so they can immediately hit for 3. Alright, so pretty aggressive start. Really hoping Scribe Gorger survives, so we can keep curving out, but not counting on it. Alright, opponent passes with 3 mana up. Now Salvager also an option, but I imagine Overlord still makes more sense. And then next turn we're looking at Elspeth. Alright, opponent's got the Entity Tracker. So I'm fine trading a 2-1 for the Hex Mage. Double blocking Tracker probably doesn't work out. So we fall to 8. Nowhere to Run answers the flyer. Alright, so we might still have Scribe Gorger to cast Elspeth. And Pixie can pick up Nowhere to Run. So, yeah, definitely not an ideal board state. But at least if I cast Elspeth and make tokens, she doesn't die on the spot. And then next turn we get double the Salvager tokens, although it's the flyers that are going to be more problematic. But then Elspeth can maybe give our team flying. So this still has to be the play. Could have minused and then just taken out the Entity Tracker, but then we just lose Elspeth to an attack. We might lose Elspeth anyway if they have another Nowhere to Run. Opponent's going face, so they might have the discard spell making us lose 2. Fear of Isolation, pick up Nowhere to Run. So that's now 3 flyers we need to deal with. But I get to cast a double Salvager, which will both double the tokens. And then give the team flying for at least a turn. So we're not dead. Overlord's also coming into play next turn. And then Salvager can also activate to keep pumping our tokens. But yeah, at 4 life, can't feel too comfortable. There's Nowhere to Run. Take out Salvager. Draw with a Tracker. Just a matter of time until they find their discard effect, and then if they can pick it up once, it's game over. Alright, opponent forced to pass it back. So end of turn we will get the Overlord in play, but it doesn't trigger the ability since it doesn't actually enter, so we don't get to make any flying tokens yet. So I definitely need to activate Elspeth to give the team flying. And then I think I can afford to activate Fountain Port first, making 2 fish tokens at the cost of 1 life. Since at 3 life, there's no big difference between 3 and 4 life, since they deal damage in increments of 2. And then we'll have those additional fish tokens with flying, playing defense. And then now I might actually want to attack with some of my 5/5s. Should still have enough on defense. And then we're at least threatening lethal next turn if we attack all out. And then do I play the Thicket out? Yeah, maybe now I do. Since we might be able to hardcast an Overlord if we top deck it. A reason to hold a land is if they have a bounce spell plus a discard spell, I can still discard the land, keep whatever permanent they bounced. Stormchaser's Talent is acceptable, draws off Tracker. Town lane big enough, bounce 5/5, pick up Nowhere to Run. Okay. Can at least exile it with a Scribe Gorger so they can't return it with a Talent. And they've got another one. Does that open up any good attacks now? I don't think so. And we we still control the Overlord, which is the important part here. Opponent attacks anyway. So I can block here. Do I fall to 1 or do I double block? I guess our opponent maybe hasn't played land yet, so we do have to watch out that they don't just win the game. And then our opponent's got 1 flyer back, so yeah, I assume they're dead next turn regardless. And then Elspeth activates once again. And smash. One flying blocker blocks Overlord and dies. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. Craterhoof's the only awkward card. Facing a red. Does elves survive? It does, but we are taking quite the beating. Alright, Sheltered by Ghosts was a decent pickup. So if I play Wild Guide this turn, I guess we won't quite be able to enable the cage next turn yet. So then I might be better off playing Voice, which is a better target for Sheltered by Ghosts. And then next turn I can either play Wild Guide with Offspring, or maybe go Sheltered plus Cage. Now a Light Shatter as well. Opponent only discarded 1 land. Alright, so I take 9. And then now I think it's Wild Guide plus Sheltered by Ghosts. Exile Heartfire Hero. And then next turn we should be able to get the cage online. Challenger can get double strike. Alright, so I guess we are in danger of just dying here, especially if they go land lightning strike. Okay, so that's an attack for 7 essentially. I'm dead if they have a Monstrous Rage regardless, so I don't think that's what they have. Jumping means I don't necessarily get Cage online next turn, because while I can make additional tokens with Voice, they're going to be 1 powered, so then Cage getting a creature to 2 power doesn't do it, and getting Voice to 3 power doesn't do it either. So I think I have to just take it here, but we're dead to pretty much anything. Alright, looks like our opponent did not have the land. So, try Cage and hope we hit another Craterhoof pretty much. Found an Elspeth instead. Okay, that's still the pick. So then I can activate Cage on Voice. Get Elspeth. And then Elspeth could finish off a Light Shatter. I attack, gain 3 up to 5. Could also just make tokens. Or pump the team, which gains us 1 more life. Also, Voice makes double the tokens now. I think I'm just maybe making 1/1s. And then hoping to chump Light Shatter since I didn't have Monstrous Rage last turn anyway. So now we're not just dead to a lightning strike that they might have had in hand. Although they could still give Challenger Trample with Manifold Mouse. I can also block with Wild Guide, put a counter on it. Ooh, our opponent found Monstrous Rage, so now they know that they can go for Double Strike. And yeah, there's not much I can do here. Let's say we put everything on Challenger, then Light Shatter still gets us for 6. So I need at least 2 toughness on Light Shatter. The rest can go on Challenger, which is 4 toughness, but this is going to go up to 6 power Double Strike, so yeah, 4 toughness is not going to be enough to survive. So I don't think it matters. Well, there was a glimmer of hope after we didn't die to the previous attack. And looks like our opponent had a Witchstalker Frenzy as well. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a promising hand. Of course, Craterhoof not ideal in our opening hand, but now I can just discard it. It's up against Pixie. Well, they tend to have a decent amount of creature removal, as we see nowhere to run on the elves. So now, interesting spot. Could just cast a cage, or I could play the elves and the recruit, or we can hold recruit to play with offspring, so we actually have 3 creatures for Collector's Cage. Yeah, I think I'm gonna need the extra bodies to enable cage, so let's just play elves for now. Opponent passes, so now we can recruit with offspring. And then not gonna attack in case they have some flash creatures here. There's a new Kirin. It's gonna be an entity tracker instead. So, opponent going for Hopeless Nightmare. Alright, so we have a decision here, but I think it's just discard a land, and then if I draw land I could decide to play Elspeth, but we're still guaranteed to enable cage. I guess never mind, I still need to wait an extra turn to activate cage. So I could just ditch cage and be guaranteed an Elspeth. How good is Elspeth on this board? It's not great against a flyer, since we cannot take it out, so we do get to make a bunch of tokens, or we can of course pump the team. I think I just discard land and then hope to get there with cage over the course of 2 turns. Drew land anyway, so now I can consider Elspeth, even though it's weaker in the face of a potential Spell Pierce. Alright, that resolved. And then let's just make some soldiers here with the +1. Can afford to lose a bit of loyalty to the attack. And hopefully they're done making me discard. So Elspeth takes 2. And a nowhere to run is acceptable. So we get 2 triggers. So what makes sense? I can put both counters on the same soldier token. Or I guess I can split them up and then next turn cage gets 1 soldier to 3 power. Alright, let's go for it. And then Elspeth could also pump the team here. Possible they're keeping up a bounce spell. We'll see what the Collector's Cage finds. An Overlord. So I don't have to necessarily activate Cage now if we're worried about removal in response to the Cage activation. And then I can just kind of play defense for a turn. Hope they tap out, and then we can activate Cage. Alright, town ain't big enough, bouncing, nowhere to run. We get an extra counter here, and then in response I can activate Cage. And could target this soldier now too. Get an Overlord, double the flying tokens as well. So that's a lot for the opponent to deal with. Opponent is impressed. Yeah, had we gone for Cage first, then we would have gotten punished by this town ain't big enough. So being patient was key. Opponent's gonna know where to run anyways. They might have 2 copies for Overlord, goes for Llanowar Elves. They are seeing a lot of cards with the entity trackers, so it's possible they'll find some answers. And yeah, maybe in hindsight they could have used double nowhere to run on the Overlord. But they maybe drew into the Pixie. They had to go for the throat anyways, so Overlord down. So we still definitely have a fight on our hands. But Elspeth probably just keeps pumping the team. And now we can get more aggressive. Is there a point in leaving a creature back to protect Elspeth? I don't think so, because they're probably just going to remove it, so then I have to keep multiples back. And then we're kind of wasting our attack here. And then we can Collector's Cage to save one of our creatures. Opponent falls to 4. And there's merit to keeping Brushland in hand, in case they bounce Elspeth and then try and make us discard it. Then I can discard the land instead. And I don't think I'll need 6 mana necessarily. Four cards in hand, 4 mana available. Stormchaser's Talon draws. So they have gotten good value out of the tracker. It's not a staple in this archetype, but they seem to be getting good value out of it. We baited our opponent into picking up the Nightmare, but yeah, they seem pretty dead to Elspeth now. Can once again fly our team. And our opponent explodes. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Our hand is not particularly exciting. Can recruit into Sheltered by Ghosts. And then it's a whole lot of nothing until we Overlord. Yeah, I'll take a mulligan. This is a bit more exciting. At least we're in a position where we can maybe top deck a Cage and get it going. Or some of our other curve toppers. Opponent on the red aggro with Heartfire Hero. There's the Cage. So I could play Cage activate, probably prefer getting Scrap Gorger online. Wait a little bit longer on Sheltered by Ghosts. And no blocks for now. Alright, Steel Cutter is fine. So if I play Cage, play Llanowar Elves, activate Cage, we can immediately enable it. So that's probably the move. Can first have a look at what Cage will hide away. And I guess it's going to be another Cage here. Play Elves, and then I'll just main phase it so we don't run into any removal in response. Maybe could have targeted the untapped Elves. And this time either Craterhoof or Elspeth. I want to say Craterhoof is going to be impactful enough. As our opponent goes digging, finding Manifold and a land. And a Burst Lightning takes out our Lanor Elves. They could have gone for the larger one, so I guess in a way putting the counter on the tapped one worked out. Alright, so now we have to do some math. Let's say I play Voice of Victory. I guess I'm better off playing Paw Patch and then activating Cage on the Lanor Elves. We get Craterhoof, we control 4 creatures. They'll get +4/+4, and then we get to attack for 9, +4/+7. So that's 20 exactly, I believe. 7 +4/+9. Yeah, that should check out. Alright, so yeah, Craterhoof stealing a quick win here. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Just needs maybe another cheaper token maker. Since playing Cage on 2 is fine, but we would much rather curve Elves into a 3-drop. Whether that's a Paw Patch with Offspring or an actual 3-drop. Alright, I'll take a Voice. Facing what could be a life gain deck, or maybe a Raise the Past, a Reanimator deck. A life creep duo, so life gain confirmed. So with Cage I cannot quite get it off next turn, since we'll get a creature to 2 power and have a bunch of 1-powered stuff left. But we're getting closer, so for now I like Overlord. Make some 2-powered creatures. And then next turn getting one of these to 3 will get the job done. Although just casting an Elspeth first could also be reasonable. So yeah, being on the play with the Lanor Elves gives us a pretty big advantage. Opponent is black-white. Channeler grows. So there might be some flyers we need to contend with. And black mana could also represent cut down, although with Voice we don't need to worry about any instant speed removal, so that's the benefit. I kind of like just casting an Elspeth here, and then we can give the team flying, or we can make some tokens. That way if Cage hits a token maker, it's going to be even more impactful. And we'll just chill. Amalia will pick up some counters. And Cleric on top. So yeah, this could still easily be a Raise the Past deck, as Cleric goes to the graveyard, and now we see a Gorehound as well. So yeah, finding a Craterhoof would be nice. Ooh, Deep Cavern Bat, that's rough. Takes our Cage. So now we don't have that hideaway. And our opponent's kind of going off. Although we can contain the Channeler just by making tokens each turn. Alright, so I guess it's Wild Guide with Offspring, play Lanor Elves. And then I could start pumping the team instead. Any attacks? Maybe Voice can get in there alongside one insect. Honestly, both insects can probably attack. So what are the top decks we're hoping for? Sheltered by Ghosts, remove Bant, get back Collector's Cage. Craterhoof we can probably cast now with all the mana creatures. Another Overlord, another Cage. So we do have some pretty powerful top decks. Opponent's got 2 cards in graveyard for potential Raise It Past, and now Starscape with Offspring. Yeah, that's pretty dangerous with a Life Creep Duo and Sanctifier on the board. And Dewdrop Cure. Opponent says no, so maybe implies that they also already have a Raise the Past in hand. And Duo goes to the graveyard, so yeah, that's certainly looking likely. So if a Raise the Past happens, we could just die on the spot with triple Starscape Cleric. Amalia gets busy too. And there's nothing I can destroy with the -3 from Elspeth. But we will certainly try and keep her alive. I guess Lenor Elves is not quite as good as the Wild Guide. Alright, land's not what we needed. So I can still give the team flying. How much are we attacking for? Yeah, the Wild Guides can also start pumping themselves. We will get to Overlord end of turn, but that may not matter anymore. So yeah, let's just make some more soldiers.
Join the fight.
And then just Voice can attack. And then I'll keep land in hand for now. So we might see a big attack and then a Raise the Past. Now Pilgrim also gives him more triggers. Yeah, Elspeth does line up pretty awkwardly in this matchup in that the -3 doesn't get rid of anything. And making tokens is nice. But the opponent's deck is pretty good at chumping to keep themselves alive and then eventually setting up a big graveyard play. And yeah, we're super dead if they have a Raise the Past in hand, which I assume they do. Nope, just another Deep Cavern Bat. Well, we're still getting drained to death here with double Starscape. So then an attack from a lifelinker is probably game over too. There's a Raise the Past. They will keep that one, it seems. But yeah, we're already dead. Could have sequenced a little differently at the start of the game, playing Cage before Elspeth. Judging from our draw steps afterwards, I don't know if that would have really helped. And yeah, now an all-out attack should be game over, since something's gonna die, and Pilgrim's gonna trigger, or they're just gonna gain life and trigger Cleric. So, no real upside to blocking here. But this is more or less how it would look like. And they also just have enough flyers to get past. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play, and I don't actually hate this. We might be able to just ramp out Craterhoof with double Scrap Gorger, Wild Guide with Offspring. That's a lot of mana. Up against. Scrap Gorger also offers a bit of graveyard hate if we're up against an Omniscience combo deck. But for now just Mountain. And they seem to have an instant in hand, so could be a Burst Lightning. So then a Wild Guide would not survive necessarily. Can block a Challenger, so our opponent's not going to bother attacking. Okay, so Wild Guide with Offspring is still a decent play here. And that should set up Elspeth on the following turn. And then Recruit with Offspring also makes additional tokens. even though I'm likely to lose the 2/2 Wild Guide. 3 mana gives him a Challenger, and Burst Lightning on Wild Guide, I presume. So then we're taking 6. Opponent's just attacking first. And now shocks our Wild Guide. Alright. No blocks. Found Cage. So, can I enable Cage right now? I guess I can with Recruit. So, I think we go for it, even though Elspeth isn't bad either. Make a pair of 1/1s that can jump. Hope they can give Trample. If they do, I could still lose Elspeth to a Monstrous Rage. So, yeah, if we can find Overlord, that's probably our best bet here. So play Cage, see what we hit, and then we can decide. Alright, there's Overlord as well as a Craterhoof. Although I don't think Craterhoof is lethal with only 3 attackers. Because I would play Recruit. Craterhoof gives a team +4/+4, so then we're attacking for 9, +5 is 14, +4 is 18. So we are getting close. But Overlord's pretty decent here, I would say. Close call. And then don't want to offspring it. So I can immediately use Cage. Could also do so at instant speed. Although I guess our opponent could mess things up with removal. So I'll just do it now. And exile the shock. Alright. And then the Wild Guide can grow itself. So now we've got a few more creatures to play with. Still Elspeth waiting in the wings. And our opponent found a Witchstalker Frenzy. And with a land they can enable it. So yeah, I don't think Overlord wants to get in harm's way. Could block with Recruits on 3/2 Challenger, and then even if they Prowess, we would still trade. If they Monstrous Rage, we don't need to worry about it later. Something along these lines. Because if I try and double block Challenger with the 2/1s and they Monstrous Rage, it goes up to 4 toughness. I guess it would still be reasonable, but then it could just Frenzy one of these two. I guess that's okay. Because then the Recruit still gives the other one a counter, so then we would still trade for Challenger at least. And they might want to use Frenzy before it goes away. Yeah. So then a bunch of trades happen. We're gonna lose both 2/1s, so I guess I'll go with Overlord. But I'm happy to trade here since we're pretty far ahead on board. And then I can play Elspeth. Double the tokens when Overlord attacks. And we'll see if that's game over. It is. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a functional hand. Hoping the Elves survives so we can ramp out Overlord and Elspeth. Against red, that's unlikely. Opponent's got the Cutter. So I can try and exile it with Sheltered by Ghosts here, although now Scrapgorger seems a bit better. So I could already cast an Elspeth next turn, and then Elspeth into Overlord makes double the amount of insect tokens. For now, Heartfire into a Wild Ride, giving it haste. Alright, so that's a lot of damage coming across, but we can soak up 2 of it at least. So nothing for Elspeth to destroy. The Trampling Prowess tokens are also more threatening, but I think we still try it. And then getting to exile their Harmonize card's also pretty good value. So just want to keep Elspeth alive, don't care if the tokens survive. For now a challenger. Okay, so it doesn't look like we're losing Elspeth. And I can even trade for a Heartfire. Perfect, and found Cage too. So now we have options. I think it's still Overlord while we have Elspeth. And then I can play Recruit alongside it. And then maybe pump the team up. Could have also tried Overlord plus Sheltered by Ghosts. But this seems pretty good for now. And then next turn we can enable the cage right away. So if we hit Craterhoof, it's game over. If we hit another token maker, we're super far ahead. Might lose Elspeth to a burn spell, but that's okay. Would prefer to keep Scrapgorger alive. Although with Sheltered by Ghosts we can still increase one of our creatures' power to set up the cage a bit better. Turn inside out the challenger. I guess we have to be careful that we don't just die to a sellsword here. But seems unlikely if they only have 1 mana available, seeing the drawback of Monastery entering tapped. Alright, sweet. So we get to see this green-white cage deck in action. And it is definitely a deck that has some very swingy games. If you hit the cage and spike one of your expensive spells, it can take over very quickly, but other times the deck can feel a little bit underpowered if you don't draw the cage or if you get unlucky with a hideaway. And against all the various red aggro decks, if you don't have an explosive start, you're going to fall behind very quickly, and there's not a whole lot of interaction that the deck has to offer. So not the most competitive deck out there, but definitely a fun time. So that's going to do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.